All right, this is Mr. Scott back once again, talking about the American Revolution. We're going to be reviewing Standard 4, the ideas in the war of the American Revolution. Standard 4, we're going to analyze the ideas, the military, the social, and diplomatic aspects of the American Revolution. These are the key terms. Make sure you know them, my friends. And we're going to kick this thing off talking about a little good bit of common sense. So, Common Sense was a pamphlet written by Thomas Paine. And Thomas Paine said that breaking away from the British only makes common sense. And Thomas Paine understood that most of Americans need to want to rebel against the British in order to actually have a rebellion. So Thomas Paine is writing his book Common Sense to appeal to the lower class people, making common sense arguments like England is an island and the colonists own a big continent. No island should rule a continent. And that England is on the other side of the ocean. And that God put an ocean in between the colonists and Britain. So God designed for them to be separate. And these common sense arguments led people to want to rebel. So, the picture on the right of 5 men. Can anyone guess the name of these men? You should have said the Committee of 5. The Committee of 5, and as you notice standing up, the guy that's usually that's on the $100 bill, Ben Franklin. So this Committee of 5 is going to be the people that's going to write the Declaration of Independence. The key person writing the Declaration of Independence was Thomas Jefferson. This Declaration of Independence was written during the Second Continental Congress. And the Declaration of Independence is just going to outline the reasons why we're breaking away from the British. And most of these reasons surrounded ideas that Thomas Jefferson took from John Locke. John Locke was an English philosopher that brought together 2 ideas that Thomas Jefferson is going to use in the Declaration of Independence. So, according to the social contract theory, who or what gives power to the government? What does the government provide for the people? Who gives the government power? That power, as you see on this graph, is given by the people. And what does the government provide for the people? The government provides the protection of rights. But what happens when the government does not protect those rights? The people then, what John Locke will argue, the people should stop giving the government power. And in some way overthrow that government in order to give a new government power. So, along with the ideal of social contract that we just discussed, you also have the ideal of natural rights. And John Locke says all people naturally have the right to life, liberty, and property. When Thomas Jefferson is going to change that to the pursuit of happiness. So these are the review questions. Pause the video and try to answer these questions. You should be able to do that by now. So, how could these 2 politicians help America win the Revolutionary War? As you see, there's Ben Franklin on the left and John Adams on the right. Ben Franklin is more popular than John Adams. And these 2 men are going to be the American ambassadors to France during the American Revolution. And by Ben Franklin being the ambassador, being the famous person that he is at that time, he's going to be more persuasive than John Adams in getting the French to ally with the Americans in the American Revolution. The French had little to gain out of this except for revenge against the British. And to them, I guess that seemed like a lot to gain. Also, they wanted to deliver a blow to the rival of the British. That's competing with them on a global scale versus the colonists, who not very relevant at the time. Why does the artist use George Washington in their political cartoon? George Washington is one of the key generals, the key general for the United States, but one of the main generals around the world that's respected by people in different countries. And as you see, George Washington is trying to kick the British out of the Americas. And George Washington's leadership is going to be critical to the success of the Continental Army. He's going to be able to secure resources and train troops that are simply local militia, and they're going to compete and fight against professional armies. So, Baron von Steuben is going to help George Washington training these troops, especially at Valley Forge. Von Steuben is going to be a guy that's pretty young, but is going to help George Washington in training these troops and getting them ready to fight a professional army. So, Marquis de Lafayette was a French soldier. Once again, he's a very young guy, and he is going to command many American troops and fight many battles in many states. So, what's the main idea of the next few images? And I think we're just going to be looking at two images. This image right here, as you see, obviously it's very cold outside. The men are struggling. You see a lot of them look sick. This is not a good situation. And George Washington is expressing that to look like one of the people that's part of this writing the Declaration of Independence and part of the Continental Assembly. So this is more pictures of soldiers and the hardships that they went through at Valley Forge in the winter of 1778. So Valley Forge, as you saw in the pictures, very, very cold place. The troops are going to spend 6 months there. A lot of people getting frostbitten, a lot of people dying from disease, a lot of people dying from shortage of food. And this cold winter is going to be very, very hard on the Continental Army, make a lot of people think about quitting. However, George Washington von Steuben is going to use this time to train the troops, send them through what we consider today a modern-day boot camp, which the troops are going to come out stronger because of what they went through and because of the training. So, which of the next three images is most historically accurate? Let's look at it. So George Washington, as you see, he's looking fierce, all the confidence in the world, and they're rowing on a river. This is the Delaware River, and going through ice, right? What do ice do? What does ice do to ships? Yeah, they make them sink. So how realistic does this look? Not very realistic. This is probably more realistic. As you can see, George Washington doesn't look as fearless. The guy on the front looks very, very worried. And there's not a whole bunch of ice, right? But we like to make the scene dramatic so that George Washington looks even more like a hero that he really is. And as you see right here, there's more ice. This doesn't look very realistic. Once again, George Washington, like he has no fear of crossing the Delaware River while it's iced over. But in reality, it probably wasn't as much ice as they would like you to believe. So why is this important? George Washington is going to cross the Delaware River, and on Christmas night, and usually during the holidays, most people are celebrating and not worried about fighting. And he's going to attack this Hessian army, which are German mercenaries that's paid to fight by the British. As a consequence of this surprise attack, George Washington is going to be able to win the Battle of Trent. And the Battle of Trent is going to raise the American morale and give people hope that maybe they could actually win the war. These are review questions. Please pause the video and try to answer these questions. So, as you see on the map on the left, you have a map of the colonies, and New York is where the next battle is going to take place. And as you see in New York, there's a lot of loyalists. So the British are going to try to attack New York to try to gain support of the loyalists in New York. The colonists are going to figure out that they're coming, and they're going to meet the British head on. And the colonists were able to gain the high ground, and able to defeat the British at Saratoga. And by getting the high ground and forcing the British to have to fight through the forest and through the mountains, the British are going to be slow to attack. The colonists are going to be on the high ground, able to pick out the British and defeat the British. This is a major turning point of the war, and it's going to further convince the French to join the American in the American Revolution. The French joining the American is very, very key. You definitely need to know that the French joining America was the biggest turning point, because the French had the money and the resources that America needed in order to win the war. So we're coming to an end of the war. As you see right here, we're looking at a peninsula. This peninsula is obviously, as you see at the bottom, Yorktown. And it's at Yorktown where the French and the colonists are going to be able to trap the British on a peninsula and force the British to surrender. The British general that ends up surrendering is General Charles Cornwallis. General Charles Cornwallis is going to surrender at Yorktown because he's trapped on this peninsula. You definitely need to know that he was trapped on a peninsula. So we'll talk about the different roles of different minority groups during the American Revolution. Women, as you see on the right, stayed at home a lot of times, but others found their way to the battlefield to try to fight in the American Revolution. So the role of women, a lot of them are going to help these soldiers while they're encamped and serve as spies to the Continental Army. And some of them is going to be hired locally to clean, cook, and sew things for the soldiers. The Indians was stuck in a hard place. They didn't want to support either side, but they rather support the British than the colonists, because the colonists were trying to take their land, while the British promised to leave their land alone if they helped the British beat the colonies. So this image is very, very famous. This actually happens before the war, the Boston Massacre, where the guy in the middle, Crispus Attucks, is shot and killed. He's seen as one of the first guys killed in the American Revolution, and he was a black guy. The blacks are going to fight on both sides in hope of freedom that they never receive. And this is an image of just how many people fought in the war on both sides. It kind of shows you as far as French, Native American, loyalists, militiamen, professionals. And you could see that the British had the obvious advantage. However, with the help of the French, the U.S. is able to, the colonists are able to win the war, force the surrender at Yorktown, and move on to establish a nation. So here's the role of blacks. Estimate about 5,000 enslaved and free blacks fought in the war with the Patriots, and they're going to fight and hope for freedom, but they're never going to receive their freedom. This is just a timeline of the map. As you see, Crispus Attucks getting killed in the Boston Massacre. You see Lexington Concord, the Declaration of Independence being written on, signed off on July 4th. And as you see, the height is where the French agrees to join the American Revolution. And you see at the end of the war, we sign a treaty after General Charles Cornwallis surrenders at Yorktown. And this treaty is the Treaty of Paris, 1783. The Treaty of Paris, 1783, Britain is going to recognize colonists as an independent nation. We're going to get all the land up to the Mississippi River. And the British basically are going to leave us alone, at least for now. So this is the review questions. Please pause the video and try to answer these review questions. And that's a wrap for standard number 4. If you like the video, hit like and also subscribe so you can keep getting these videos and prepare for your tests. Leave a comment below and I will respond to you. Have a great day, guys.